Hello and welcome to this episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. Today I am joined by Justin Gold. Justin, thank you for coming onto the podcast today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. So you founded a company called Morphodox. Tell us about that company.
Sure. Morphodox is an indie game company where right now I'm the lead game designer and the only software engineer in the team, and I do a little bit of everything game development except for the art and music. I have other people helping with that. And we're just a small company. We're working on a game currently. We have other plans in the future for other games potentially too, but we're pretty much laser focused on our game Ashes right now.
Okay. And have you released any games prior to this one, or is this the first title that will be coming out under Morphodox?
This will be the first commercial release with Morphodox.
Yeah, first commercial release. When can we, expect to, play that game?
Um, it's really too soon to give an exact date because things always change.
Of course.
Definitely not this year, and probably not into next year. But we're trying to go as fast as we can. It's the difficult thing is with the team because we're all doing this kind of part time right now with other jobs and
Mm-hmm.
everything. That it's when we set a goal for a timeline, things always get set back a little bit. But we're pretty much we're pretty far along now with the game. Like the core gameplay is pretty much there. It's just there's a lot of content left to make. So I couldn't give you an exact timeline, but we're going as fast as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any trailers or artwork, anything publicly released?
Yeah, we have some concept art and some early prototype videos of the game on Twitter.
Okay. So for anyone listening, I'll get those links off Justin, and I'll put them in the description so you guys can check them out, and I'll be interested in checking them out myself. So what sort of art style are you going for with this game?
It's like a 2D stylized side scroller type of game where we're going like high definition, high resolution graphics, and it's essentially the game's about a phoenix, and it's a rhythm game, a rhythm platformer game, and levels are created based on the music. And you can play as the phoenix. Your lifespan is linked to the song, and you're reborn with the next song. And essentially, with the art style, we're trying to go with something a little bit more, I guess, a little bit different than traditional rhythm games. Because a lot of times you'll see rhythm games are more about like just the colors and the shapes, and going with the music and everything. We're trying to have something a little bit more stylized and illustrated type of approach with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you mentioned that there's other people other than yourself. I think you said, did you say an artist and a sound guy? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's
So
currently.
is there, carry on?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's currently four of us total. We
Okay.
have, other than me, there's my wife who does the artwork. She does
Mm-hmm.
art and animation and anything visual like that. Then we have the sound guy. He's the composer and sound designer. And we have one other guy helping out who he helps me a little bit with some other additional game design. And he doesn't do a lot of coding right now, but I'm teaching him Unity and C Sharp a little bit, so maybe he can help out a little bit in the future. But that's the core team right now. We've had other people on the team kind of come and go, over the years, but
Mm-hmm.
um, that's where we are right now.
Yeah. So obviously, I've checked out, your background on LinkedIn or where you worked, and we're gonna continue discussing that. But what about your other team members? Share a little bit of a background, where they work, what they've done.
Sure. Um, they currently don't work in the industry like
Okay.
like I do essentially, but my wife, she does a lot of stuff around the house, and she spends a lot of time doing the artwork on the game, and other miscellaneous stuff going on. And the other team members, they work in they do like it's, I guess I describe it as like I guess home health care for helping people in need, and they're not really doing game related stuff, but their passion is with game development, and that's why they join the team. They want to help out with games, and I know they also have a band together. Two of them are friends, and they work on one's a drummer and one's a bassist, and the sound guy, he's the bassist, and their passion is music and games, and it was kind of a good fit for them to join the team.
Okay, I mean, it's very interesting to have people from different backgrounds. Like you said, you're in the industry, you're a engineer currently, and it makes
Hmm.
sense. But for the other ones, it's something they want to do, but they're just not currently actively doing it in their careers. So, Morphodox is over 10 years old. Have you been
Hmm.
working on this game for those 10 years, or were there other projects that just didn't get released? And how long have a follow-up question, how long have you been working on this project if it hasn't been the full 10 years?
Um, yeah, it's kind of both actually. We've worked on other stuff, but Ashes has been the main focus for most of the time. It's kind of been on and off over the years. It's kind of got a long history. I could probably spend the whole time just talking about that, but because 10 years is a long time. But essentially, we started out working on a different game before I founded the company, and I had some other people on the team, and that was kind of our passion project. And the problem is, it got kind of out of scope, and it was became a larger project. And realized we don't really have the resources to finish this right now. Maybe we can put this on hold and make something else. And around that time, about a little over 10 years ago now, actually, yeah, I guess, yeah, since not too long before I started Morphodox, I did a global game jam, and we worked on a game which we called Ashes. And the only thing that's similar about it is it's about a phoenix, and the name of the game was Ashes. But the game was completely different, and the game jam didn't go that well. And what happened was I was also going to school studying game design for my master's program, and I needed a capstone project to work on. And I thought, well, I can bring back this Ashes game and try to work on that, and we can kind of put other game on hold for now and focus on Ashes. And what happened was, like I said, we had other people on the team, and over time, the game wasn't really taking off that well with what we were trying to do, and it kind of we also were trying to make an engine at the same time before I picked up Unity and everything, but it didn't really go that well with the team, and a lot of people left, and other people joined, other people left, and over time, it just kind of was up and down, and there was a short period where we weren't really doing too much on it, but eventually, what happened was a couple of years ago, I started to pick up more with C Sharp and Unity, and I was the only one who was the programmer left. It was just at that time, it was just my wife and I working on it. She did the art, and that's when it started to pick up more. Was when I started doing a lot of the coding myself, and that was probably the best decision was picking Unity to work on that, because it was a lot easier to do than making our own engine and what we were doing originally. And the only issue there was around that time, because we had been doing this for a couple years, it and it wasn't taking off. I started to run out of money with where we were at, so I had to kind of look for other jobs to help pay for the bills and everything. And you know, so then what happened was it became kind of a part time thing. So even though I was more focused and I had a better vision of what the game was, it the time kind of drastically got cut. So that's where we've been the past couple of years, and I brought some people on, like I said, and some people left, and but the team I have now is pretty solid, and we're just doing this in our spare time when we have a chance, and really trying to get this thing going. And I know it's been a long time. We really want to get it out there, but at the same time, I know that because it's been so long, I don't want to just kind of rush something and get it out too quick either. Where it's like something that we want to release something that we're proud of, that we know we can stand by, and then we can work on the next game and everything.
Okay. So, how much money did you invest in Morphodox on these products? Are you open to sharing that?
Um, Definitely most of my money, um, money that I had saved up when I started. I invested about 20 grand, but then over the years I've had to invest a lot more than that, and it's just kind of like ballooned a bit, in
Hmm.
terms of even though there's not even though we're keeping the expenses pretty low, like we don't have a full team of salaried workers, and we're keeping a lot of other expenses pretty low. It's still a lot in terms of personal budget. So I'm just kind of doing that on my own, self funding it, and I guess you could say that the follow up to that is, well, why don't I get investors and try to get that going with that? And I guess you could say that I really want to keep this. I really want to keep, I guess, investors hands off it right now, and just kind of have more of our creative vision kept pure in that sense. And I don't want to do anything too premature either, because I knew that where we were at previously, we were still prototyping the game, and I know that any kind of negotiation with um, investors and anything, it's always about leverage in some way. Who has the leverage, and they have the upper hand in the negotiation. And where we were at for a while was we didn't really have the game fully solid until recently. I would say that I probably could go and do that now. I could probably go and pitch something to investors and get something. But even that, I would go back to the original point in that I'd want to keep it as is, pure to the team. And now I'm kind of just investing some of my money working on the side, and even though it's still tough to do that, I still prefer that right now than I guess any other route.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I totally understand because when you do start bringing in outside funding, there will be certain requirements for that funding, and it might be like, oh, you need to release the game within this period of time, and that might
Hmm.
hinder the quality level, or they might say, we're not quite too sure about that particular part. It needs to be like this, and then one thing snowballs into another, and before you know it, you got a totally different game to what you actually wanted. So yeah, that's totally understandable. So obviously you put 20,000 initially in and more, since then. That's no small amount. Like, where has that gone? In terms of like the split, is it mainly just hiring people, or has it been equipment? And then a follow up question to that is, in the people that you have, excluding your wife, do they receive a salary, or are they like paid with like a percentage of the company/product?
It's been a mix in terms of the expenses. There's generally an upkeep with just having a company in general, especially like paying the taxes, the insurance,
Hmm.
the just general fees of things in general. And that's kind of the baseline. There's been definitely equipment over the years. I bought a couple computers, and I tried to make sure they were decent enough to run the game well, to pretty high end that we can do that. And same with my wife, she got some computers, so there's definitely a lot of hardware. Um, Early on, like a while ago, I took some trips to GDC, and that was also an expense. And but other than that, there's also licenses of stuff, but like software. But other than that, it is paying for contracting with the people that I've worked with, and it's kind of a mix. They're not salaried employees, but they are contractors. So I do give them some money up front, but the way we work out the agreement is that it's a modest amount they get, but there is guaranteed more when the game releases, a revenue share that they'll get paid more. So it is, I guess you could say, it does lower the expense a lot having that type of agreement where it's just a little bit up front and more so offloaded when the game's out. But when you bring on people over the years and then they leave, and then you have people that are there for a couple years. It still adds up in the expense. So it's even though it's cheaper, it's still expensive by my standards, I guess.
Yeah, obviously, when you're individual, like I said, when you're not funded, it can be obviously expensive. So, these people that you hire, do you provide equipment to them as well, like a laptop or a computer, or is it on the basis that they have to use their own? And also, l- how have those discussions been when you're saying we're gonna give you some money, but also some revenue share? Because I'm guessing some people haven't, been fully on board with that idea.
hmm Yeah, right now we use our own equipment, um, for the most part, and we do have like software licenses that I pay for. Like we have like a Microsoft Teams account and email company email accounts and stuff like that. I provide, but the hardware is right now they're upfront paying that, but it is definitely a difficult negotiation, you know, because it's one of those things where you can really only get your friends to kind of agree to something like that kind of thing because most people don't like that, revenue share as a. I mean, as I understand, because as somebody who's has to pay the bills too, and I have to seek other employment, I probably wouldn't look for a company like that either. But so you get a mix in terms of interest of people, and the past couple of years we haven't really been actively looking for people other than the team I have now. But we did still have a couple people that inquired, and we worked with them a little bit, and it's one of those things where like your pool is different of potential people because you're not going to get the people like I said who really um, want to make this their career at that time. Like you'll get people who want to get experience and people who are passionate about what they do and they maybe don't mind working for more revenue share, but it's still uh, it's still difficult negotiation. So that's why, like I said, it's easier when you have people that that are doing it. So that's why like, hiring my friends like that was a lot easier to get them to to work with me on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's perfectly understandable because not everyone does want that sort of revenue share model, and like you said, you gotta pay the bills as well. So it does require someone that you're close with, like friends or somebody that does believe in the product as well. So you mentioned
hmm
Unity and C Sharp. What other technologies do you use, and why did you go for Unity over Unreal or some other alternative?
Um, Other than Unity, obviously I use Visual Studio for um, the IDE and everything. But as far as the team software, we use Microsoft Teams to collaborate, and that's gone pretty well with our collaboration tools there. And we have a Microsoft Office suite on there, and um, we use OneNote for a lot of documentation, which is kind of an unorthodox tool because we used to use Confluence, like the wiki, and we found that OneNote was a nice compromise between like having a document and also having it kind of more almost like it's not a wiki, but it's still not like a single document where you can have kind of
Hmm.
pages, and it was a nice compromise for us to use OneNote. And other than that, we also use ClickUp for our project management, which we used to use Jira, but ClickUp, the one advantage we had with that was it had a pretty good feature with Gantt charts. And one of the things, like you said early on, is it's difficult to make a timeline in general. So the ability to have tasks on a timeline and be able to visually see it was a nice feature we went for with that. And there's other tools out there that do the same thing, but we just found ClickUp was a nice one. And as far as why I use Unity, uh, I was more comfortable with C Sharp going into this, having started with XNA. It's a kind of an old framework that Microsoft made years ago, and I used to use that That's kind of what I started game development with. So I had some experience with C Sharp, and I looked into multiple engines. And I know I was originally considering like Monogame was one of the ones I was going to use at first, but then ended up settling on Unity because I looked at other engines like Unreal, and Unreal it seemed like a very solid engine for games. Even at the time because I looked at it a couple years ago, but it seemed more geared towards 3D, and we're making a 2D game. And the real issue there was we're using a tool called Spine for animation. And I know Spine, they do support Unreal now, but at the time they didn't support Unreal. So the pool of options was kind of limited. And I looked at the ones that they supported, and it seemed like Unity was one of the better ones, or at least one of the ones that was best fit for what we were doing. And just the general architecture of Unity was easy to pick up, I would say. Like my metric for picking an engine at the time was just kind of like, can I make something quickly and put it on multiple platforms and just have the Spine system running with just something with a Phoenix running with Spine on like on the phones and on PC and on multiple platforms. And I tried that in multiple things that it supported, and it wasn't straightforward always, but with Unity it was pretty quick. I was able to get it working, and I was like, okay, this seems like a good engine. And just the architecture of Unity being component based was something that I was used to with my work with trying. Even when like I said, we were trying to build our own engine originally, and I went to school studying game development, and they kind of really stressed how component based engines were really a good architecture. It's not the only way necessarily, and but it was just the most natural that I felt I could adopt, and it just seemed like a good fit. And ever since I used Unity, I'd say things have gone a lot smoother in terms of the game development.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's definitely the case when you use a solid engine like Unity, and I have found the same as well with Unreal. Though they have 2D functionality, it feels overkill for 2D, and it feels like if you're
Hmm.
doing a pretty big 3D game, yes, Unreal probably be better, unless you have a ton of Unity experience, then maybe not. But if you're trying to
Hmm.
go 2D, then Unity out of the two will serve you better than Unreal. And obviously, the fact that you came from a C sharp background, obviously more of a no brainer as well. So,
Hmm.
as a CEO, what is your like day-to-day responsibilities?
Um, well, I guess the one that's a big one that a lot of people don't really talk about is it's checking emails and responding to people kind of inquiring about things like for instance, I get a lot of inquiries from people who think we're a different kind of company, and they're like, "Oh, we have developers we can provide you, or we have this service, we have that service." And there's always like checking email, seeing which ones I can respond to, and saying, "No, I don't need their service." And a lot of them think that we're a different kind of company, and it's just
Mm.
either whether it be on LinkedIn or directly in email. I get a lot of solicitations and stuff like that, just because they know we have a company. But in terms of the actual job itself, it's more of managing the business side of it in terms of keeping the books in order, like dealing with the accounting and the taxes and any of the legal aspects that are needed and licenses. But in general, it's about leading the team. And we're a small team, but I still you know try to approach it the way I would if we were any size team, where you learn project management skills, general people management skills on the job as being a CEO. And I try my best to make sure that everyone feels included, and I communicate with them often. Like I said, we have Microsoft Teams right now, and we communicate through the chat, and we have weekly meetings, and I keep the meetings organized, and try to keep the project focused.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You're gonna have all these other responsibilities like accounting, making sure everyone's on track, managing all that stuff. So it isn't, just the development side of things as well. So yeah, you will have all of all those other aspects of running a business. I know all those sides as well. So have you ever thought about, because you've been working at other companies whilst at Morphodox, to help fund it? Have you ever thought about leaving those companies, going full time on Morphodox, and doing some freelancing, via Morphodox for other clients, maybe making some games for them or doing a bit of game work for them and trying to fund Morphodox that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the challenge there would be being able to match my salary, I guess,
Hmm.
because I know it's hard to get by as a freelancer, especially at least at the stage we're at, and it's convenient having a full time job to be able to pay the bills and have a little bit extra that I could stash aside for Morphodox. But I see your point that you know I'm set out to work for myself would be ideal, and it would be a challenge. I think the other thing to consider too is that not just where does my funding come from and how much funding do I have to put into Orthodox, but also what does the brand represent? That's the other thing I got to consider is, are we a consulting company? Are we a game company? Do we work in other games? Do we work on our own games? And I wouldn't rule out working on other games. I think that's necessary. That a lot of companies do that, especially early on. They they collaborate on other stuff and try to get contracts and stuff. But in general, I see the long term of Orthodox being more about our own intellectual property and trying to focus on the games that we release will have a certain type of feel to them. They'll be matching our brand. And I feel like if we were to just make games for other people, we'd have to keep that in mind. Like, does this fit us as a company? Like, 'cause if we get requests for, like, let's say some random game that's really different from something that we would be used to, and we release it, and then we release Ashes and other games like it alongside it, it could make our brand look a little inconsistent if we have multiple things that are kind of like completely different. And that's something we have to keep in mind. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I'd say it's unlikely because, like I said, we wouldn't probably won't make as much money early on, and the game would have to really fit our brand identity and everything.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Like trying to get that balance of, because the last thing you want to do is quit a full time job where you have these hours, and yeah, you might have to work some slightly different hours, but you know 9 to 5. Afterwards, you can work on more for dogs. Weekends, you can work on more for dogs. Whereas if you start doing freelancing through your company, that's effectively another business venture that you're
Hmm.
starting, and you're managing those clients. You're managing the accounts. You're figuring that out and trying to you'll have set deadlines that you'll need to meet, and you might need to work extra hours. So it's, yeah, trying to get that balance. And obviously, like you said, with working in a regular company in the place that you're at, your salary will be a lot easier to obtain than it would if you're doing freelancing. Plus the consistency of it, that all goes well every month you'll get your salary. Whereas with freelancing, you might just have a dry 6 month period and we'll have no clients. Plus,
Hmm.
or clients might not pay up. Chances are, a company you're working for will pay, whereas a client, for whatever reason, might be delayed by 3 months, and then that can cause huge strain on the development process of Morphodox, but then also, personally as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So last year you started working at Magic Leap. What do you do there?
I'm working as a software engineer at Magic Leap, and right now I'm on the SDK team, like, 'cause they have a Unity SDK where the Magic Leap device works with Unity, and a lot of their projects are made with, a lot of people who work with it work with Unity, for instance. So We're working on the SDK to essentially kind of bridges the gap between the engine of Unity itself and the Magic Leap headset, and just making sure that everything works together so other people can build their apps and everything.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So why has Magic Leap gone down the Unreal route? I mean Unreal, sorry, the Unity route. Or are they doing Unreal stuff as well and you're just part of the Unity side?
Yeah, they're doing Unreal as well. I'm just part of the Unity side.
Okay.
Unity is their bigger client right now, and I think part of that might have to do with the industry they're in. Like I don't know for sure the numbers, so I mean don't quote me exactly on how things work, but I'm pretty sure Unity is more common with like simulation type of things, and I know there's a lot of Unreal stuff out there too. So they are getting more Unreal work with it as well. And I haven't touched the Unreal side of it, so I don't know too much about the implementation of it, but they do have Unreal as well.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So a few years back, Magic Leap was everywhere in the tech news. I remember, the videos coming out, the possibilities of what it could provide seemed endless. Nowadays, you just don't really hear about it that much anymore. In your
Mhm.
opinion, what happened and what currently is Magic Leap working on?
Well, their focus shift to enterprise. That's probably why you don't hear about it as much because I'm I wasn't on the team yet. I guess early on, so I don't know how things were. I guess when they were more public facing with consumers, because I'm pretty sure their first device was more broad, but they have the Magic Leap 2 headset, which is their latest device, and it's more for enterprise, where they're targeting companies that try to make like simulations and all type of stuff with it, and it's a little bit higher end, so it's a little bit out of the price range of the average consumer who's just going to buy you know another AR or VR type of device. But that's really the main reason is it's more enterprise driven.
More enterprise driven. Okay. So ultimately, what is Magic Leap's mission right now? What is it creating? What's it going towards? And can we expect a more mainstream release, or have they fully shifted over to enterprise only?
I guess you would have to ask the people involved with the planning to really know for sure what's going on, because I mainly just work on the SDK. But from my understanding is right now they're mainly enterprise focused, so they they might do more in the future. That's possible. I don't really know what they're doing with that, but that is their main focus right now.
Okay. So you've done a variety of VR and AR work over your career. What about this area excites you? And do you have plans of doing some VR AR work within Morphodox and in your game or not?
Well, it kind of started because I guess where I live in New Jersey in the United States, it's not like a tech hub for like games. So looking for a game job was very difficult. For instance, like I don't live like in California or Washington, anything like that. So I couldn't just go out to a game company and say, "Hey, look, hire me." And so it kind of type of jobs that I was looking for were different. And I found, for instance, a different company I worked for that did VR AR stuff that was kind of local. It wasn't too far from where I lived at the time, and that's kind of how it started. And now working with Magic Leap, they're not local, but I work remotely with them. So that was the one convenient thing that now I can work remotely. That does open up the pool of opportunities, but because I had experience with it, that allowed me to find that type of job. And in terms of VR and AR type of stuff in Morphodocs, we don't really have any plans right now, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, because mainly our focus is 2D games, and at least with a 2D stylized game of Ashes, and it wouldn't really fit that type of platform. but I wouldn't rule out in the future potentially, something along those lines.
Okay, that's interesting. So, what would you recommend to people looking to get into this, VR and AR space? Because it's, very exciting. It's relatively speaking very new. Uh, so, what would you recommend? How should they go about getting into this industry in this area?
I guess it depends what they're working on, but I can only really speak as like a software engineer. But I think just having general software engineering experience and even game development experience does help you, because surprisingly there's a lot of jobs out there that aren't game development related that do hire game developers, and they do work
Mm,
with game engines. And if you're looking, even if you're looking to work for a game company one day and you can't maybe find a job in it, it's not a bad opportunity. It is a good opportunity to work for these type of companies to get experience. And even if you're looking for just doing games, and if you are looking for doing VR AR stuff in general, just having that game development experience really helps with it, because like I said, our main focus right now is Unity. They also have Unreal. I think they might even have some prototypes with Godot, and I think other devices do the same kind of thing. They're going to have Unity and Unreal, and you're not going to go wrong, like just picking one up and learning it and getting experience. Because I guess one concern people might have when they're doing game development early on is they might think, well, if I can't get a game job, it's just going to be a waste of time. Should I work on doing programming websites or something? And I would say, not if that's only do that if that's what you're into, because there's a lot of VR, a lot of AR stuff out there that uses game engines that you will probably find something eventually that does work in your area. And in my case, like I said, I'm not even in a game hub area, and I still found jobs that use game engines. And that's pretty exciting to be able to do that.
yeah, for sure. Because obviously you're working at Magic Leap, though it's not a video game company. There's gaming sort of elements to it. The fact that they're
Hmm.
using technologies like Unreal, Unity, which are generally game heavy. You can get into those sort of companies. I had somebody yesterday who was on the podcast and not live yet, just recording, who also worked here at Magic Leap. He doesn't work there anymore. He was there for 6 years, and prior to that, he had worked at Sony, Blizzard, these sort of gaming companies. So definitely, just because you have a gaming background and you still want to stick within that sort of gaming technology realm, let's say it's Unreal, Unity, OpenGL, C++, whatever, doesn't mean that you
Hmm.
only have to get a gaming job. There's so many more companies out there that aren't generally gaming, but they'll still utilize the same technologies. There'll be simulation companies out there. There'll be, space companies and aeronautical companies that'll
Hmm.
use some of these technologies to create, real time models. So you can leverage those gaming skills in a variety of ways. And I totally agree what you're saying. Yeah, there's web development and sometimes that can pay more, especially if you're doing like database work, for example. But if you don't enjoy it, like you've got to, figure out what you want from your career, want from your life. Because if it is purely money and you are happy with that, then that's fine. Chase those roles that will get you more money. If it isn't 100% money and you just want an okay amount, you want to be able to live, go out, enjoy yourself, but you want to be fulfilled, and web development doesn't do it for you, then maybe you need to think, okay, do I need gaming? Can I get the gaming sort of enjoyment from a non-gaming company? Because that really opens up the possibilities a lot more.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So, did you go to university? If so, what did you study?
Yeah, I did a lot with school, and actually still technically in school, finishing up a PhD now. It's kind of a long journey that I went through with school, because I started out at a local college, and I knew I wanted to work with game development. I didn't know what the best path was, so I started with computer science, and then ironically, the school started up a game development program like the first after the first year I was there. So I joined it as one of the first, I guess, in the first class that they had, and I was the first person to major in it. And I got multiple degrees. I did computer science and game development, and I started up a game development club, which was kind of the precursor to Morphodox, because that's where I met some of the early people who I worked with. And actually, I came up with the name Morphodox while I was in that club, and it was kind of it was the placeholder name of the team at first, because it was kind of more related to our other game we were working on. And I really liked the name Morphodox, and later on just became the company name. But I learned a lot going to school there, but then I transferred to RIT, which is a bigger school, and Rochester Institute of Technology, and they have a really good game development program. I went on to get a master's degree there, and I learned a lot about game development there as well. And they sent me out to GDC 1 year, and that was a really good experience. Um, and beyond that, I actually started teaching game development for a little bit after I finished my master's degree. Started out teaching computer science as an adjunct, and then I was teaching game design at a different school before I started working in the simulation companies and everything. But then while I was teaching, I realized that you get a lot more out of it if you have like a PhD. Because I thought like, well, if I'm going to be, because at the time I thought, well, if I'm going to be doing this, I'll probably teach for a while. And then I always wanted to get a PhD. It was because I've gone through so much school, and it was kind of a goal of mine at one point, but I wasn't fully invested yet. And then when I was teaching, I was like, okay, well, I might as well do this because it's either now or never. So I started the PhD, and then I stopped teaching, but I still doing that. And now I'm at the point where I'm almost done with it. I'm working on my dissertation, and I only have a year left on it. So, yeah, once I finish that, I'm sure I'll be done with school. I can't think of much else I'll do in terms of school, but it's been a long journey, and it has helped me in a lot of ways.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, what's the focus of your dissertation?
I'm majoring in computer science, and the focus of the dissertation is essentially on the effects of dynamic difficulty adjustment in games on the player's flow state. And for anyone who doesn't know, flow is essentially like a state of mind where you're kind of in the zone, where everything else just kind of fades away, and you're really focused on the task at hand. And it applies to more than just games, but there's a lot of research on flow in games, and the aspect of that, or the a lot of the research kind of alludes to that. The way to elicit flow in a player is to make sure that the game's difficulty consistently matches their skills. So one of the theories behind it is a lot of people pursue is just looking at what does a dynamic difficulty adjustment system do on the effects of flow? Does it really help with it? And can it work in games? Because some games integrate dynamic difficulty in some ways. And a lot of games don't. A lot of games are kind of just manually designed with a difficulty in mind. Maybe they'll have difficulty settings so you can kind of choose yourself, but it's kind of static. It's not adapting to you. But with a dynamic difficulty adjustment system, it's adapting to how well you're performing in the game. And I thought that's a really good topic to research because it is something I would say it's not something I would guarantee that I would just jump on to use, but it is something that it piques my interest enough that I would say, well, if it works, I might consider it in future games. It wouldn't work in Ashes necessarily, but maybe future games it could work. and I wanted to know how you would do it, how you would make a game AI that adapts to your performance as a player.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense because I played games before, and I might not be doing so well, and I feel like it's making it a bit easier for me, or like I'm doing a bit
Hmm.
better, and it's matching my skill level just enough that I feel challenged, but not so much that I don't enjoy playing it anymore. Then obviously you get games like you said that are literally just a set difficulty. Something like Flappy Bird, for
Hmm.
example, that mobile game. I think it was just hard, and that was it. So obviously, there's different, ways of doing it. But obviously, you'll have a more concrete analysis of that. Are you graduating next year? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's the goal. Um,
That's the goal.
I'm still working on the dissertation, and once that's finished is really when it's official. So, at some
Yeah.
point next year it should be done though.
So, what does like that dissertation involve? Do you play a lot of games? Do you develop some system, like some mini games, some tech demos, and then get people to play them and get their feedback, and watch them, monitor them somehow, attach them to some sort of machine to see, their heartbeat or something like. So what are you doing, to write the dissertation and get that research?
Well, a lot of it is looking at other research that's been done first and seeing other papers that are out there and doing a literature review and kind of an overview of what I'm going to be actually doing in the research. A lot of it is just kind of just defining what is this theory of flow and dynamic difficulty and looking into a broad category of research. But as far as the actual research itself, which I still have to finish, I'm planning to work on a small experimental game that'll I'll get essentially two versions of it where one will have dynamic difficulty, one won't, and I'll get people to play it and answer a survey about their experience. And there's been some research on different types of surveys that help determine if a person is experiencing flow. And I plan to use a lot of those type of questions to ask them in both cases, to see, do the results change with the dynamic difficulty system? Is there more flow? Is there less? It's kind of comparing the results of the two experiments essentially.
Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. So, how important do you think going to university is for somebody that's looking to build a successful career?
It really depends on what you're looking to do, and also, I guess, what you end up getting out of university, because you'll hear mixed things from people. Some people say, oh, well, you have to go to school to get a job, or other people say, oh, well, you don't need school at all. You can just kind of do it on your own. And it's kind of the middle ground there, I would say, where it's like, well, you can do it either way. You know, the hard skills that you learn, like for instance, programming, you don't necessarily need a university to do that. Like, it helped me a lot having a background in computer science and game development just to learn that stuff, because when you're starting out, a lot of times you'll see, especially with programming, a lot of people won't have the confidence to just write code because it's so overwhelming that there's so much to learn that you don't even know where to start. And university is not a bad way to start. It's usually a good way to get your feet wet and learn that stuff. But even with that, it'll teach you the ways to get started and how to learn it. But no matter whether you're going to school or not, you're going to have to still kind of teach yourself a lot of the stuff on your own eventually anyway. Because, for instance, I didn't learn Unity in school. When I was in school, we did some C sharp and we did C++ and other stuff as well. But I think having that background really did help me pick up C sharp and Unity faster, though. That I think if I didn't go to school, I probably could have eventually learned it, but I guess it could have taken as long, or it could have taken longer, depending on how I went with it. But having that background really did help my skills and help my confidence and help my knowledge. And I was able to pick it up pretty quickly. Like following online tutorials, it just kind of came naturally with understanding. And as far as getting a career, that really depends on the company. Every company has a different standard. Some companies are more strict about they want a person with a degree. So other companies don't really care. But what matters most is your experience. And whether you go to school or not, a good thing to do is gain some type of experience and a portfolio, if you can, of projects you work on, or um, just picking up stuff on your own, and you can kind of pass a technical test. Because with a technical job, like for instance, working as a software engineer, it's common for them to have technical tests, and school can help you in some ways with that, but it also doesn't really cover always the same things. Every company is different in what they're looking for, and whatever path you choose, you just have to be prepared to pass that technical test. And you can make it work either way, I would say. But having school, one advantage probably is it opens up doors a little more in some ways. I mean, just in general, if you network with a lot of people, it doesn't matter if you go to school or not. But it does open up some doors, and if you're applying to a company, let's say, it does look good on your resume to say, "Oh yeah, you went to school. You must know something, probably." So then, it doesn't guarantee you have the job, but it does open up doors, and kind of gives your first impression on them to say, "Well, okay, well, show me that you know something in this." As where if you don't have anything, they're going to assume like, "Okay, well, now you have to prove that you know something because you don't have any kind of experience
Hmm.
behind you with it." So I say in the very beginning, it's probably a little bit easier if you have some school, but in the end, it really doesn't matter, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, especially if you can, show a portfolio, projects. You obviously need to show something, and a degree will get you more likely through the door. But if you can prove that even without a degree that you're willing to learn, that you have the skills, and here is proof of it, even if it's on free projects that you've done yourself or for other people. Like, if you are starting out, this is my advice: do some projects for some people, either on the cheap or even for free. And you don't need to
Hmm.
tell the company that you're going to go and work for, the client, that you did them for free. It's just, I worked for these people for 6 months. I made a website for them. That's all they need to know. They don't need to know that you did it for free or they're a friend necessarily. Like, you don't need to share all that information. Just the fact that you worked, and let's say you did a real project for them, that'll be enough. That's what they want to see. They're not that fussed about, was it in a regular professional capacity for the most part. As long as you don't tell them as well, and as long as you have the skills to back
Right.
it up, you're all good. So, in your opinion, how do you think people can get the most out of their time at university, especially from a non-academic standpoint?
Well, a couple things. I would say networking in general, whether you go to school or not, is always important. So if you're in school, one advantage you have is that other people are also going to be in your industry, and learning, like, I guess, getting involved with other people and understanding, just kind of making friends, but professional friends more so. You have a lot of doors open up later on where you might know somebody who has a job somewhere else, or they're doing something else, and it'll come back to help you later, especially. And I think as a student, one thing that's kind of hard to do because you're usually very focused on your classes is that you do have more time than you think, like in the sense that you usually, I mean, sometimes people will work and go to school, and that's, you don't really have much time anymore. But if you're just going to school, for instance, you should be able to spend some of that time making side projects and just help your portfolio and enhance beyond what you're learning at school. Because school will teach you stuff, but it's not gonna really give you that full portfolio on its own. Or it'll help enhance that. It'll help your knowledge. It might help you might work on some projects for classes, but companies really look for something more. Some companies look for, do you have more solid experience in, different types of projects, and with that extra time that you have, I would say use it and learn what you can and just experiment, build things, just try to have fun while you're doing it too.
Oh yeah, like experimenting, figuring stuff out. The networking part is, definitely a key part. Like for me, one of the biggest regrets I have my time at uni that I didn't do that much networking. I ended up meeting people just through my time at uni, and that was more of a passive form of networking. But I wish I had been
Hmm.
more active in it, and not just networking with people because I did a programming degree, so not with just programmers or even artists, networking with, having a group of friends after uni that, was a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, like all these different things that
Hmm.
I had met. And one way that you can go about it is join some clubs that aren't,
Yeah.
degree specific. Like if you join a game development programming club, you're probably only going to get programmers and game developers for the most part. But if you join something a bit more generic, maybe some sort of sports club, if you're into that, some sort of astronomy club, you're probably going to get a broad, or like a movie club, you're probably going to get a broad range of people, and make an effort to talk to them. Obviously, it depends on the individual. You might not want to be friends with them, but like if you feel like you would, like, make that effort, because they're in that same. You just got to think they're in that same position as well. They're probably finding it awkward. So if talk to them, they're probably going to be receptive. So that's one big regret I had, I have about uni, that I just didn't network that much and gain a good circle of friends outside of my core programming art subject. And I wish I had
Hmm.
done that, where I had, like I said, lawyer, doctor, accountant, somebody's going to go into some sort of management, somebody's going to go into design, all these other different things. So that's one recommendation I would have. If you are going to university, use your time like that. You've got 3 years or 4 years or however long it is. It's a long time, but if you don't utilize it from the start, it goes quick. Like before you know it, you're in second year. Before you know it, you're at the end of your first final year, and you're handing in your dissertation, your project, and you're like, where did the time go? And before you know it, you're leaving your university building for the last time, and that's it. So like, definitely make use of that time.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
mm, so what are the best resources in your opinion for learning to code, and also learning game development? Unity as well.
I use a lot of online tutorials. Like the site that I use a lot is Udemy, and there's other sites just like it, that have a lot of tutorials. And I know there's free stuff on YouTube, but that can probably be hit or miss because it's very specific. And I guess sometimes it's easier if you have a course that you pay for and you can just refer back to. But just in general, online resources, books, um, they're really, getting your feet wet, just experimenting on your own, trying these things out is good. Because what I would suggest with these tutorials too is follow them along, but then try to modify them on your own, kind of experiment to see what you can do on your own. Because if all you're doing is just copying what they do, like, you do learn some things along the way in doing that, but you're not going to grow as much because you're just gonna do what they did, and then you're not gonna have independent growth where you're being able to experiment on your own. So I would say, like, do what they do and build on it.
Yeah, to totally agree. When you're learning, experiment, change it up, then eventually start your own project. So if you've learned a bit of, game dev, some components in, Unity, some animation, create your own project, and maybe you've got some idea. Or another way I love learning is doing clones. So let's say
Hmm.
some of the simple video game clone, because in terms of the game design and even the artwork, because you can get ripped that off Google, and if you're not obviously distributing it, there's no harm in that. You can get all that side of it, and if you're learning coding, you can have all that ready, and how the game should work. Because when you're learning to code, learning to create games, or even a website or anything, for example, you might implement your skills, utilize your skills, and you might not be that good, and you don't know if it's not that good just because the sort of the design, the way it flows isn't quite there, or is it your technical abilities? Whereas if you try and clone like a Space Invaders game, or a Pong game, or a Breakout game, you can match the or tic tac toe game. You can match the gameplay and the design and the flow of it almost one to one, and you'll know more likely, is it your technical capability that's laying it down, or is it something else? So that's definitely another way of learning as well, is doing your own projects, but also especially clones of stuff, and then those could
Yeah,
be
that's
adapted
true.
into more your own projects that you might want to publish later on, add your own flair to it. So
Yeah.
what is your coding and desk setup like these days?
Um, my desk. Like, do you mean like what's on my desk right now?
Yeah, they're like multiple monitors, one vertical, one horizontal monitor, like that sort of stuff.
Right. I have my iMac and I have another monitor. So dual monitors. I have a PC also hooked up to my monitor, and I have one of those corner desks. So on the other end of the desk, I have my monitor for work. So I have three monitors on my computer right now. It was my work computer on the side of that, and it's just kind of like the corner desk just has monitors, keyboards, and it's, a lot on there right now.
Okay. And what about your coding setup, like on your computer? Because you mentioned Visual Studio. What other sort of tools do you use and applications?
I mainly use Visual Studio. It offers a lot on its own, and I'll probably look into some more tools to maybe help with some stuff too, to maybe make things more efficient. Because I've heard good things about Rider, for instance, that it's supposed to be really good with Unity and C Sharp. But I'm mainly experienced with Visual Studio right now, and Unity offers a lot inside the editor itself that I don't have to do too much outside of Unity and Visual Studio. It's most of it's kind of self-contained for the most part.
Okay. Do you use any like text editors that are lightweight, like Sublime or Notepad plus plus, just to quickly open files up, or do you just mainly use Visual Studio?
In that case, I usually use Visual Studio Code. It's like a
Okay.
more lightweight version of Visual Studio. Um, because that's usually what I would use for those type of things.
Okay. What do you think of AI and ChatGPT and their effects on the industry?
To be honest, I haven't been following, Chat GPT very much or very closely. I'll probably look into it more to see, what kind of effects it's having to be able to have a better opinion on it. But in general, I think, it can be good, it can be bad, but it's just kind of the way things are going now, where AI is the future. But I think how it gets used is important, and I think what's important to keep in mind with any of those type of AI tools is that you know they are very powerful. That they can be good, used for good, but there's also been used for bad, in the sense of, like, for instance, I've seen a lot of AI generated artwork that kind of, it's good in the sense that you can make those things quickly, especially if you're not an artist, like being able to just type in something and it finds stuff for you in it makes it, that's nice. But at the same time, the problem underneath it is a lot of times it'll copy styles of other artists without their consent, and that's going to create a lot of ethical concerns for the future that I think, you know, people really have to think about, like, where what their AI is learning from, because AI, it only does what it learns, so it has to have some kind of source that it learns from, and a lot of these systems are just kind of ripping off other sources without their consent, and I think we need a little bit more of a discussion of the ethical standards behind it. Like, I think it's good in general. The technology is great, but the ethics behind it needs a little bit more work, I think.
Yeah, definitely those sort of legal, copyright, ethical issues. Because right now, obviously, you can generate that stuff, and then obviously it's totally up to you what you do with it. And if you are distributing and selling it, that can cause potentially issues. And yeah, one of the things I like about something like ChatGPT is using it as like a resource to search things up that I generally know and I could figure out. Like if I'm
Hmm.
doing some sort of C++ stuff, for example, I've implemented bubble sort before, and instead of trying to find that, I can just type in C++ bubble sort, and it gets me that optimized bubble sort code in C++, and I know how to
Right.
use C++. I know what's happening. It's a great resource for stuff like that. Obviously, you got the flip side where somebody that may not know coding that well will be using it, and then they don't fully understand. But it's definitely a great way of just referencing and just getting hold of information that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And I think like another great thing, like the person I had on the podcast yesterday, he had a good idea, which was make it so, let's say if you're trying to switch from C++ to Python, you're trying to learn Python, you could have C++ code, let's say some function, you could get ChatGPT to rewrite your C++ function to Python, because
Hmm.
fundamentally you know what that function is doing because you wrote it in C++, and then getting a Python version of it. That assuming there hasn't a lot of extra code hasn't been added for the sake of it during the conversion. If that hasn't been the case, and the Chat GPT stuff is getting a lot better, then you can learn it just by dry running that code in your head, and just figuring it out, because chances are it's going to be in a similar order. And okay, if this line or these lines did this in C++, it does this, and then you can see the commonalities between different functions and work it out that way. So that's another great thing about something like ChatGPT, the educational side as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good resource to complement anything else you're doing. As long as, like you said, you're not trying to use it to replace, like your own skills, because it can be good to learn. It can be good to adapt what you're doing, and it's like, to say it's all bad wouldn't be good, because it's like, that'd be like saying a search engine is bad and you should be able to just know everything on your own. And it's like, nobody does that. Nowadays you look something up on a search engine because you don't know it. Even with coding, a lot of times, you know, it's not a bad thing to look up on Stack Overflow something somebody did. If you're just copying and pasting code and you don't really know what you're doing, I mean, that's bad, because you should really understand it. But Chat GPT and those type of AI tools are just kind of like the next level beyond a search engine, where it's like,
Mm.
instead of something a person made, it's something an AI figured out from all this information out there, that it's the next level. So it is, that is definitely a good use of it. I agree.
So, what would be your biggest regret in your journey so far as a programmer and as running your own company?
Um, well, like, as you pointed out earlier, it's been a long journey, with Morphodox, that it's taken a lot longer than we kind of expected with everything, and I think a lot of that, my regrets are early on not having enough confidence in my own coding abilities to do certain things myself, and also relying on other people in ways that maybe relying on them too much. Like, because when I started out early on, I had another person who did programming and music, and then had another artist. And my goal was I was going to do the game design and run the business, and I can help out with some coding here and there. But I wasn't really as invested in the coding as much as I probably should have been, and that definitely is a big regret for me. That I think relying too much on the other people to do that stuff, and then they leave, it kind of slowed things down, it hurt things. And if I would have believed in myself more, and kind of just learned the stuff on my own, and the way that, like I'm saying now, you should probably, in addition to school, you should try to learn coding on your own and that type of stuff. If I would have done more of that than I did, and maybe waited a little bit and just built the game on my own, and then maybe found additional help beyond that, had a core on my own, then I think it would have had a more solid foundation in the beginning. But in the end, I don't really regret starting when I did, because getting the company going, then it really opened up a lot of doors. Because it yeah, it costs more money technically having the company for a lot longer than before the game came out, or before it hasn't been out yet. But having the company so long, it costs a lot of money. But it has also enhanced the image, and it's gotten us some some following already without even having the game out there. So right now I'm trying to keep a low profile, but when we're ready to release the game, a few months beforehand, or however long when we have our marketing campaign, or really try to get things out there, I can't guarantee how things will go, but I am a little bit more confident that it'll go more smoothly now that I have something as a foundation than if I would have just started the company from scratch. In the future, I think that's a good thing. But in terms of my regret, I definitely think if I would have, you know, done more on my own early on, I think it would have helped a lot, speed things up a little bit faster.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. It's one of those difficult things when you're looking back. You think, okay, if I made these decisions, done these hires or not done these hires, if I had, you know, done these few things differently, could I, could this thing that was painful at this moment being, avoided? But you just gotta, move on and progress. So talking about that, like, what advice would you give to someone looking to follow in your footsteps, that wants to create their own company, wants to make games, wants to be in it for the long haul like you? Because most people would not stay in it that long, or wants to work for a company like Magileap, get into the gaming industry. What advice would you give?
I would say, believe in yourself and never give up. That's really what's driven me this whole time. Is I'm not the kind of person to give up on something. As you pointed out, that it's there were several points where I probably could have given up, and I don't think people would have really looked negatively on it. They would have said, "Oh, well, that's just what it is. You tried. You can walk away now." And that wasn't acceptable for me. I still feel like I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm still getting to where I want to go. That I don't plan to give up, and I think having confidence is important, but making sure that that confidence isn't arrogance is also important, because you have to make sure that you're confident in yourself, you're confident in your team, you're confident in everything around you is solid, that you're confident in the tools you're using. Everything has to be confident, but you can't guarantee confidence either, because you have to make sure that everything is actually solid before you can be confident. But at the very least, as you're trying to get those things together, you're trying to get a solid foundation. If you at least believe in yourself and say, well, if I try this, if I experiment on this thing, if I, you know, go this one path, whether you succeed or not doesn't really matter immediately. What matters is, are you learning? Are you growing? And you're not going to do that if you don't try. You're not going to learn. You're not going to grow if you just kind of sit there and go, well, I can't do this, so I give up. Like, don't give up. Believe in what you're doing, and don't get discouraged if you fail. Because I would say failure is your friend in that sense. Like, you learn from failures, and the only path to success is through usually a bunch of failures up to that point that a lot of times you don't see.
Yeah, when failure occurs, you've got to utilize it, and it can be hard in the moment to think, you know what, I'll utilize it, because it can always in the moment seem like the worst thing ever, that if you just regret, I should have done this differently and this would have been different. But I always like the way I like to try and get over difficult moments, that are happening right now, is I think, what was that thing that I thought was the end of the world a year ago? And most of the time I can't even think of it, but I guarantee you
Mm,
there was a thing or multiple things probably every week last year that were problems, and I just don't remember them now. And I'm like, most likely this will be one of them, because I'm not hit with some news about some illness that I've got and I've got 6 months to live. I'm not hit with news about family member dying, or all my money being stolen because my bank account's been hacked. Like, it's never issues like that, and as a result, I just say to myself, I'm not even going to remember this. I'm probably not even going to remember in 3 to 6 months in any major way,
mm,
let alone a year, 5 years, 10 years. So you just got to figure out a way to get through it, be productive, and just, learn from those mistakes, and just think, okay, instead of thinking, I should have done this differently before, say, okay, I'll do this differently now going forward.
right, I agree.
So that's all my more specific questions done. At the end of the podcast, I have a few generic questions, and the first one is, would you rather, I mean, you're already doing it, but it'd be interesting to see your answer. Would you rather run a 10-person company or a 1,000-person company, and why?
Hmm. Well, right now I would say 10-person company because that's still even more than I have right now, and I think having that small team allows me to be hands-on, and especially as the CEO, I don't necessarily want to be hands-off either. I want to be able to still be a game designer and be a game developer. That if I was in 1,000-person company, that'd be kind of hard, and I'd have to either give up be running the company or give up the ability to be hands-on. So I would say 10-person in general, but I mean, in the long run, things could change a little bit in that, if we grow more beyond 10 people, it's, I'm probably will try to find some kind of balance, but 1,000 people is right now where I'm at now seems like a lot of people. So that's kind of hard to imagine right now.
Fair enough. Would you rather have $5 million up front or half a million a year for the rest of your life, and why?
Well, just based on the math, assuming I live more than 10 years, which I would hope, it would obviously work out better with half a million the rest of my life. But I think your question really raises a good, interesting perspective because it's more of a question of like, would you want something now, or are you willing to wait for everything later? And I think the advantage of me having 5 million up front right now, for instance, would be I could grow the company faster. I could hire people faster. But at the same time, that type of growth that quick doesn't guarantee success either. It could also fail faster. So in my situation, I would still say the half a million the rest of my life because then I wouldn't have to work another job. I could work for Morphodox, and regardless of how big it gets, whether it stays small, whether it's big, you know, I would be guaranteed that 500,000 a year, and it would. I essentially I could just find a good balance in life, I guess, and not have to worry about whether I make millions or not. It could, if it comes, it comes, but if not, then at least I'd have that safety net there.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. Uh, What's your favorite board game, video game, and movie?
Hmm. Board game, I guess probably Settlers of Catan. I used to play that when I was in college once in a while. Um, Movie, it really varies. Maybe Inception or Memento or one of those movies. I don't watch as many movies as I do play games and stuff, but in terms of my favorite game, I think it depends on what point of my life, because there's been a lot of games that come out, in the past, time since I've been a kid. But when people ask me what my favorite game of all time is, usually I would refer back to when I was a kid, and my favorite game was Earthbound. And around that time, I also played a lot of Chrono Trigger. That was one of my favorites also when that came out on the Super Nintendo, and Super Mario RPG. And that to me was kind of like a golden era of RPGs, 2D RPGs, and Super Nintendo was really cool. But then later on, I would say other games came out, like one that was really influential on me when I was a teenager was Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. It was a co-op action RPG, and I wanted to make games kind of like that one day. And beyond that, as I got older, I still stuck with RPGs a lot, and I liked Mass Effect was one of my favorites. I also played Witcher 3, Dark Souls. Those are good games too. But most recently, the game that I would say I played in the past year that I really like and I'm looking forward to the next game of was Breath of the Wild. I think that's a more recent game that I would say really is really good, and I'm looking forward to the next Zelda game that comes out. And the other game I'm looking forward to, I haven't played yet. Obviously, it didn't come out yet. Or is Starfield. That looks kind of interesting, but other than that, the Zelda games are really usually pretty good.
Okay. So, what video game are you looking forward to, or video games?
As I mentioned, I'd say the new Zelda game coming out.
Yeah.
Um, and even that Starfield game definitely looks good too. But this new Zelda game looks really interesting because I like the first Breath of the Wild. I thought that was good, and the new game looks really awesome.
Oh yeah, definitely for Zelda fans. Was it Tears of the Kingdom? Is it called?
Yeah, I think that's what it's
Yeah,
called.
it's definitely a game I think a lot of Zelda fans are looking forward to, and I think it's out next Friday. Is it next week? I think it's
I
soon.
think soon it's come. Might be next month. I thought. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I still gotta pre-order it, but it
Yeah.
definitely looks pretty good.
But plus, you're in the US, so the dates might be slightly different. I find sometimes in
Yeah,
the US, the games can come out like a few days earlier, so
yeah.
that's possible as well. So, final question: does money buy you happiness, and what does a good life mean to you?
Um, I would say money itself doesn't, but money provides you things that usually you need to be happy if you don't have it. Like at least in our current society, we don't live in Star Trek world. It's unfortunately we live in a society that you need money to get things, and if you don't have any, you obviously have difficulties. So to a point, it kind of can, in that it'll help provide you things that you need to be happy. You can obviously be happy internally on your own without that. Money doesn't provide that happiness. That's all internal, but you're going to have a lot of struggle without money. And I can't speak for how it is if you have millions or billions or anything like that, but I would think there's probably a point of diminishing returns where you have enough money that not only can you get by on necessities to live, but you have enough money to have luxuries around you that make you happy. And then beyond that, I don't know what people do with their money if they have that much. I guess they just invest it, and it becomes like a game at that point. Because I can't say that would necessarily make you any more happy, but there is a point where it probably would help. But to your second point of the question, what a good life would mean, I think generally having a balance is important of whatever makes you happy. And it's usually, you don't want to rely on just one thing. You want multiple things in life, whether that be your family, time to yourself, spending time with your friends, your career. You want to make sure that's something that you like, and in general, you want to have a reason to get up every day. That can generally be a good life, but you want to make sure that you're not overspending too much on one thing, because if you're spending all your time working, for instance, then you're probably not going to be happy unless you really like your job. But even still, is that healthy to do that? So you want to have some type of balance in life. That to me would be a good life.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like having that balance, because like you said, you will get to a point where you will get the rate of diminishing returns with money, and I think for different people it's a different amount, but it,
Hmm.
I don't think it's as high as people think it is. Plus, it depends on if you're willing to invest it as well. Because if you are willing to invest it, let's say into stocks, that must pay some dividends or some, property or something that can, get you a relatively passive cash flow, then you could get away with in many ways less, because you're not reliant on a fixed amount to sustain you for the rest of your life. But knowing that you're gonna have to put some work into it, and that's part of life, and that's part of the enjoyment of life, is also very important to what a good life at least means to me personally.
Hmm.
So those are all the questions I've got, Justin. I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast today, sharing your insights of being an Unreal. I mean, sorry, I keep saying Unreal. Unity developer, C Sharp developer, working for starting your own company, running that for over 10 years, having people come and go, working for Magic Leap, and working within VR and AR within your career, and obviously being heavy into education as well. Appreciate you coming on. And if I'll get those links for the, I think, the concept art that you spoke about, and I'll put that in the description for anyone that wants to check out Justin's work. And I look forward to hopefully playing the game, hopefully in the next year or so. Hopefully it comes out. And are there any closing comments from you, Justin, before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. I think it was a good, discussion that we had. I really liked it, and I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Thank you for coming on, Justin. And thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of FireDEV. And stay tuned for next week's episode. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.